The sun bled orange across the canyon, streaking the sky with fire as the wind moaned low through mesquite and sage. Dust rose in lazy spirals from hoof prints left behind by cattle wandering back toward the barn. Boone Talbot stood on the porch of his weather-worn ranch house, a steaming tin cup in one hand, eyes on the far ridge where the sky seemed to stretch into eternity. His face, carved by time and sun, was unreadable, a mask of leathery calm broken only by the occasional blink beneath the brim of his hat. The land stretched wide and lonesome around him. To the west, a patch of cottonwoods marked the edge of the dried-up creek. Beyond that, Apache territory, or what was left of it, and further still, the outlaw trails, routes whispered about in saloons and behind locked doors. Boone didn't ask questions about who passed through. Not anymore. He took a slow sip of coffee gone cold. At his feet, the porch boards creaked under the shifting weight of an old blackhound, bones thin but loyal still. It raised its head and gave a low, cautious growl. Boone didn't move. His eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. He set the cup down, stepped off the porch, and walked toward the corral. The wind was shifting, brushing against the nape of his neck like fingers. As he neared the cattle pen, the animals stirred, restless, snorting low. Then he saw her. She lay half-hidden behind the water trough, slumped and still, barely more than a silhouette in the shadowed dirt. An arrow jutted from her back, another snapped clean at the shaft. Blood, dark as rust, soaked her deerskin blouse and pooled in the dust beneath her. Her face was turned toward the earth, cheek pressed against the ground, as if she were listening to the land whisper goodbye. Boone knelt slowly, hand on the revolver at his side, watching for movement. He'd seen traps like this before, wounded left in the open, bait for the merciful. But there was no other sound, no whisper of breath behind the rocks, no creak of saddle leather, just the wind and the hound's low whine. He touched her shoulder. She flinched. Still alive. She blinked up at him, dark eyes hazed with pain and defiance. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Her skin was streaked with sweat and dirt, her braid tangled and torn. Apache. Young, perhaps 20. The kind of young that hadn't yet learned to be afraid of death, but now stared it in the face. Boone didn't speak. He lifted her as gently as a man could lift a dying bird, her breath catching with the movement. The arrows had missed anything vital by some miracle, but she was weak, burning with fever, and losing blood by the minute. She shouldn't have been here. Not alone. Not this far north. Boone moved quickly, his stride sure. Inside the cabin, he cleared the cot in the corner, spreading a clean blanket as best he could. The hound circled near the hearth, ears pinned, sensing the shift. Boone set her down carefully, pulled a knife from the wall hook, and with practiced hands began to cut away the cloth around the wounds. She hissed through her teeth, but didn't cry out. "You speak English?" he asked gruffly. Her eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling. Then a nod. "Barely." "Name?" "Naeli," she whispered. Boone didn't respond. He focused on removing the arrowheads, deep and barbed. She arched off the cot in agony, but he held her steady, hands steady as stone. He'd done this before. Too many times. He poured whiskey over the wound, ignoring her muffled screams, and worked in silence until the bleeding stopped. The fire cracked softly behind him. Outside, the wind howled louder. When she finally slept, her breath shallow and labored, Boone sat back in the chair by the door, staring into the flickering shadows. The memories came crawling like scorpions out of the dark, faces long buried, voices he'd tried to forget. The war, the blood, the things done and never spoken of. He'd ridden with men who burned villages, just like hers. Watched women and children turn to ash, because someone whispered the word Apache. He hadn't stopped them. Not at first. Not until it was too late. And now here she was. A stranger on his land, bleeding on his cot. He knew what the townsfolk in Calico Ridge would say. That he was a traitor. A fool. Some would ride out just to see her dead, and make sure he paid for harboring her. The law out here was a thin shadow, and the lawless, they were thicker than weeds. He stood again, walked to the window, and stared out across the empty fields. But they weren't empty. Far on the ridgeline, just under the last amber light of the dying sun, Movement caught his eye. Riders. For maybe 5 silhouettes against the glow. Still as statues. Watching. Boone didn't move. They weren't townsfolk. And they sure as hell weren't lawmen. They didn't come to check on cattle or tip a drink. They came for something, or someone. His jaw clenched. The wind blew harder now, carrying with it the distant creak of leather, the soft jingle of metal. It was a warning, quiet and cruel. He turned away from the window, walked back to the cot, and looked down at the girl. Naeli's brow was wet with sweat, her face pale as bone. He didn't know who she was running from, or what devil had chased her this far, but she wasn't safe. Not here. Not anywhere near men, who watched from ridges, without saying a word. Still, he covered her with a blanket, tucked it around her thin shoulders like a father might. Then he locked the door, lit the lamp low, and sat back down in his chair with the rifle across his lap. Boone Talbot had spent 15 years trying to forget what kind of man he used to be. Tonight, that man was coming back. By the time the sun sank behind the jagged hills, the ranch had begun its slow transformation, from quiet homestead to killing ground. Boone moved with a practiced rhythm, his boots silent across hard-packed dirt, arms laden with wire, oil tins, crates of ammo, and sharpened stakes. Every trench he dug, every nail he drove, spoke of a man who had done this before, not once, but many times. The memories lived his body more than his words, and now they moved like muscle memory awakened from long sleep. He rigged the corral gate with trip wire and black powder, set a line of jars stuffed with crushed glass, and lamp oil along the fence posts. Buried blades beneath loose soil where a boot might land wrong. His face was calm, his hands sure, but inside, something else stirred, something bitter and tired and old. Naeli followed close behind, limping but alert, her hair tied back tight, bow across her shoulder. Her face was still pale from blood loss, but there was fire behind her eyes, warrior fire. She watched Boone carefully, absorbing the way he worked, the ruthless efficiency of a man who'd survived ambushes and sieges and left others dead in the dust. As they wrapped wire around the barn beams, she finally spoke. "You've done this before." Boone didn't answer right away. His fingers tightened around the wire, twisting it hard. "Too many times." She stepped back, watching him. "You were a scout. That's what you said." Boone met her eyes. "I was a killer." The silence between them grew heavy. A wind kicked up through the ravine, carrying the faint metallic scent of coming rain, or maybe blood. "I rode with men who were paid by the scalp," he said. "Didn't matter if it was a warrior or a child. We took what we were told to take. I didn't ask questions. Not until the screams started sounding different." Naeli didn't speak. Boone's jaw worked, slow and tight. "One day I spared a village. Lied about what I saw. Thought it made me good." His voice dropped to a rasp. "A week later, my wife was burned alive in our own home. Men I used to ride with did it. Called me a traitor." Naeli stared at him. Her lips trembled with restrained fury, but her voice was steel. "So now you help me to make peace with the ghosts." "No," he said. "I help you because I'm done running from them." She held his gaze a long time. "I don't forgive you. I don't expect you to." Then she turned away, climbed the ladder up to the barn's hayloft, and began setting her arrows in a neat line across the windowsill. Dusk fell like a curtain, slow and heavy. Coyotes howled in the distance, and somewhere beyond the ridge, a crow cawed just once before silence swallowed the land whole. Boone crouched near the corral's edge, rifle nestled against his shoulder. Naeli was posted above him, her shadow barely visible against the fading light. They waited like statues, their breath the only movement. Then came the first sound, the distant creak of leather, the metallic whisper of spurs, hooves crunching dry earth. The Severin gang moved in like wolves. Boone counted 5 in the first wave, not the full 50. Scouts. They moved in pairs, rifles drawn, voices low. One peeled off toward the barn, another to the rear pasture. They weren't charging in like fools. These were practiced men, hardened men, killers. Boone motioned once to Naeli. A silent nod. She drew her bow. The first man reached the stable gate, crouched low to check the ground, and dropped before he could blink. An arrow sunk clean through his throat. He gurgled quietly, body convulsing in the dirt. The second froze, turned just in time to catch Boone's blade in the belly. No gunshot, no cry, just a gasp and then silence. 2 down. The others hadn't noticed. Not yet. They moved closer. Boone and Naeli vanished into shadow. The trap behind the water tower caught the next one. His boot tugged the tripwire, and the oil tin burst open with a loud crack, sending shrapnel and flame into the air. The man screamed, staggering back with his face on fire before collapsing into the trough. The fourth went running, and that was his mistake. Boone shot him mid-stride, a clean crack of thunder that echoed off the canyon walls. The fifth scout turned, wheeled his horse, and bolted into the brush. Boone let him go. Let him carry a message back. This was no easy kill. The silence returned, heavier than before. Boone and Naeli regrouped inside the barn. Smoke drifted along the rafters, and the scent of burning oil hung thick. She sat against the wall, catching her breath, hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. "They'll come harder next time," she said. "They will," Boone agreed. He checked the ammunition in his revolver. "They'll think this place is haunted by something worse than them." A creak came from the corner stall. They turned as one, weapons raised. A figure emerged, bleeding, limping, one hand raised. One of Severin's men, young and wide-eyed, missing his hat and most of his courage. "Please," he rasped. "Don't shoot. I was just following orders." Naeli stepped forward, arrow drawn. The man dropped to his knees, hands trembling. "They'll kill me if I go back." "They'll kill you if you stay," Boone said flatly. But the outlaw shook his head, eyes darting to the door. "No, no, you don't get it. Clay's bringing the wagon." Boone stiffened. "What wagon?" "The big one, with the black barrels." He swallowed hard. "Dynamite. Says if the bitch is alive, he'll burn the whole place down just to smoke her out." Naeli's mouth set into a grim line. "When?" "Sunrise." Boone stared at the boy, reading the truth in his sweat-soaked face. Then he turned away. "Lock him in the cellar," he said. Naeli hesitated. "We may need him later," Boone added. She nodded, prodded the outlaw forward with the tip of her arrow, and vanished into the shadows of the house. Boone stepped outside again, staring at the dark horizon. The stars had come out now, cold and distant, blinking over a land thick with menace. He could feel it in his bones. The way the air tensed. The way the cattle didn't move. The land was holding its breath. And so was he. 50 men were coming. But they weren't the only ones who knew how to make the earth burn. The smell of smoke always came first. Not the fresh kind from cook fires or cedar logs, but the sour, acrid burn of buildings caught in flame and flesh caught in worse. Boone Talbot had smelled it too many times, long before he owned cattle or listened to coyotes howl beneath the stars. The war had soaked its scent into his skin, and no amount of soap, whiskey, or silence could wash it out. The dreams came back that night. In them, he was young again, riding through a box canyon with dust thick in his mouth, blue coat unbuttoned, the silver badge of the Union Army scout glinting beneath. His face was unlined, voice still sharp, heart not yet dulled by guilt. He had ridden ahead of the battalion by 3 miles that day, instructed to confirm Apache presence and mark a trail for artillery. He found the village instead, just women, old men, children. No warriors, just families sweeping floors, hanging hides, braiding hair in the sun. He could have signaled, could have lit the flare that would rain hell down upon them. Instead, he turned his horse and rode back the long way. Lied, said it was empty. The battalion moved on. Days later, they found a raided gold shipment 20 miles west. Boone thought he'd done right, that he'd finally unhitched himself from the darkness. Then, 2 weeks later, raiders came to his ranch. 3 men with torches and rage. They said he was soft, that someone had to pay. His wife screamed only once. The sound still echoed inside him. Boone sat now in the same wooden chair, by the cold hearth, the morning's first light creeping through the gaps in the shutters. His hands were steady. His eyes were not. The rifle lay across his lap, like a sleeping animal, faithful and ready. Behind him, a dry cough stirred from the cot. He turned. Naeli was awake. Her face was pale but taut with caution, lips cracked, eyes wide. She tried to push herself up, then winced as the healing arrow wound burned fresh. "You'll rip it open," Boone said. She looked at him like a cornered deer, unsure whether to bolt or bite. "I'm not your enemy," he said, slowly rising to pour her a cup of water. Her voice came brittle and hoarse. "Why did you help me?" He handed her the tin cup and leaned back against the table. Didn't have a reason not to. She studied him, fingers trembling as she sipped. "Most men do." Boone gave a quiet grunt. "Most men are afraid of ghosts." "You think I'm a ghost?" "I think you're lucky to be breathing." She drank again, then set the cup aside. "My name is Naeli, daughter of Red Elk." Boone's eyes flickered. That name was aflame from long ago. Red Elk had been a tribal elder, wise, fierce, respected even by white men who feared everything they didn't understand. Boone had never met him, but he'd heard the name whispered like prayer and threat both. "He's still alive?" Boone asked. Naeli's gaze drifted away. "He was, until last week." Boone didn't press. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "We were camped near Black Mesa. The Severin gang came in the night. Said we were hiding gold. They tied up the elders. Shot my brother in the mouth." Boone's jaw tensed. "They burned everything," she went on. "Children, mothers, even the dogs. Said there was Spanish gold buried under our fires." She paused. "They're still looking for it." Boone knew the name Severin. Clay Severin was a stain across the frontier, an ex-Confederate captain with a knife for a smile and 50 men who followed him like vultures. They pillaged across Arizona and New Mexico, always just out of reach, protected by fear and corruption. Rumors said he once crucified a town sheriff and left him hanging for the coyotes. Boone's voice came low. "How many came?" 50. Maybe more." Her eyes narrowed. "They saw me run." "You sure?" "I saw their faces. I remember their horses." Boone ran a calloused hand over his beard, staring into the fading fire. 50 men. His ranch barely had 50 bullets left in storage. Most folks would have ridden into town, begged the sheriff, maybe tried to disappear down south. But Boone Talbot didn't run anymore. Outside, the wind shifted. The hound whined once from under the porch. "You planning to kill them all yourself?" Naeli asked, the edge of a smirk curling despite the pain. Boone turned to her. "No." She raised an eyebrow. "I plan to make sure they never ride again." For a moment, the room went still. Then she chuckled, hoarse and hollow. "You don't talk like a rancher." "I'm not." He moved to the cabinet, opened a false panel, and pulled out a black oilcloth bundle. Inside, an old army revolver, a belt of cartridges, and a scout's knife, curved and worn with blood memories. Naeli watched him in silence. "You were a soldier," she said. Boone fastened the belt around his hips. "Scout. Union Army. Spoke Apache when it suited their cause." She tilted her head. "So you knew us." "I knew your words," he said. "Not your hearts." He opened the door, stepping onto the porch. The morning was quiet, too quiet. The sky above was a bleak, colorless wash. In the far distance, where the land rose into hazy hills, Boone saw what he feared. Dust. A long, trailing cloud kicked up by hooves. Dozens of them. Riders. He walked back inside. "How long?" she asked. "Hour. Maybe less." She sat up straighter. "We can ride." He shook his head. "Won't get far. You're hurt. They've likely got scouts along the canyon trails." Her jaw clenched. "Then what?" Boone looked at her with an expression not of hope, but certainty. The kind of certainty that comes after you've buried every person you ever loved and still found breath the next day. "We turned this place into a graveyard," he said. Naeli met his gaze, and though fear flickered behind her eyes, something stronger bloomed there too. "Fire. Then I want to bow," she said, "and the high ground." Boone gave the faintest nod. The hound barked once. The riders were coming. The fire started in Boone's head before it ever reached the wood. Smoke and ash. Heat rising through a canyon throat. Screaming horses and rifles cracking like bones. He remembered the mission that made him disappear. 8 men riding under Union Blue into the Apache borderlands with orders to clear a pass. Ambushed at dusk. 70 hostiles or more. They fought all night. By dawn, Boone was the only one left standing. Hands covered in blood, not all of it Apache. The pass was littered with corpses. His men, their men. Crows came before the sun did. Boone never went back for his commission. The brass sent a letter of commendation. He burned it. Now, the night carried that same tension, the same charge in the wind. It was the silence that always came before the killing began. Boone crouched in the dry ravine that ran behind the cattle pens, eyes on the trail. The moon was low, red as a fresh wound, casting the land in rusted light. His traps were set, tripwires across choke points, a lasso of kerosene-soaked rope ready to catch fire at the pull of a single spark. Naeli lay in wait above, hidden in the rocks with a flint stone and a line of flaming arrows. Movement. A whistle, soft and sharp, like a hawk's cry. Then came the riders, 6 in total, flanking low and fast, trying to skirt the front lines. Exactly where Boone wanted them. He let the first 2 pass beneath him. The third slowed, scanning the ridge. That hesitation was his death. A sharp whistle. Naeli's arrow ignited mid-flight and struck the line of rope like lightning. In a breath, the ravine erupted, walls of flame towering around the horses, men screaming, trapped in a funnel of fire. One tried to turn his horse and flee. Boone shot him clean through the spine. Another leapt from his mount, only to land on a tripwire that triggered an oil charge. The explosion threw him back into the flames. The rest ran blind, into chaos. It was controlled fury. Years of war honed into precision. From beyond the flames came the echo of fury. Clay Severin's voice tearing across the night. "Whoreson bastard, you bring fire to me." Boone stood at the top of the ravine, silhouetted by fire, rifle on his shoulder. "Only what you taught me, Severin," he called back. Clay Severin emerged from the shadows on a black horse, shirt open to the chest, scars like twisted rope across his skin. His face was older now, but no less cruel. The same narrow eyes, the same crooked grin he wore at Chaco Crossing, the day Boone had watched him torch a trading post with women and children inside just to make a point. "You still kill children, Severin?" Boone asked, voice loud enough to carry. Clay sneered. "I kill whatever breathes in my way. That includes you." One of Severin's lieutenants rode up behind him, shaking, face smeared with ash. "We lost 4 more in the draw." Before the man could finish, Clay turned and shot him in the face. The man's body crumpled in the dirt, twitching. The other riders backed away, without a word. Severin looked back up at Boone. "You're gonna die slow, Talbot. Gonna hear the girl scream first." Boone raised his rifle and fired. Missed the man's boot by inches. "Come get me." Severin snarled and wheeled his horse, disappearing into the night. Boone turned and made for the barn. The flames from the ravine were still rising, smoke curling into the stars. As he approached, a new figure appeared through the haze. An old man with a limp, rifle slung across his shoulder, gray beard fluttering like a torn flag. "Ezekiel," Boone muttered. The old ranch hand gave a lopsided grin. "You didn't think I'd sleep through this little barn dance, did you?" Boone shook his head. "Thought you were dead 3 winters ago." "Close enough." Ezekiel clapped him on the shoulder. "You look like hell." "So do you." They didn't need more words. They moved together, checking the south wall, repositioning barrels, reinforcing the barn door. Naeli came down from the loft, face streaked with soot, arms blackened with grease and dirt. She nodded once at Ezekiel. He nodded back. Then, the crack of a shot split the air. Naeli cried out and dropped to the ground, clutching her leg. Boone spun, fired twice into the darkness. A scream followed, then silence. Ezekiel was already there, hauling Naeli behind the feed crates. Boone dropped to his knees beside her, pulling her hand away from the wound. It was deep but clean, through the thigh, no bone. She gritted her teeth. "Keep going." Boone hesitated. She grabbed his wrist. "Don't stop." Another round of gunfire struck the front gate. The Severin gang was pressing now, circling like sharks, pushing to find a weak spot. Flames licked the edges of the roof. embers raining from the sky. The barn was burning. Ezekiel ducked out to lay cover fire, rifle cracking again and again. Boone hoisted Naeli onto his back, grunting as he pushed through the smoke toward the back exit. They didn't make it far. A shadow moved from behind the trough, another outlaw, younger, eager. He raised his pistol. Ezekiel appeared from the side, slamming his own body into the man's. The gun went off. Ezekiel grunted. Then his knife found the outlaw's ribs. They both went down. Boone called out, but Ezekiel waved him off, blood pouring from his gut. "Go," the old man croaked. "Get her to the canyon." More shots tore through the night. Boone didn't argue. He carried Naeli behind the barn, past the burning fence line, through the chicken coop that was now a smoking shell. They reached the narrow canyon where the cliffs loomed high and the air funneled tight. His last stronghold. He laid Naeli down, crouched beside her, breath heavy, heart like a drum. Above them, the stars blinked through smoke. Behind them, the ranch burned. Before them, the final stand waited. The canyon yawned like a throat waiting to swallow the damned. Boone stood at its mouth, his breath thin, the ache in his ribs a reminder that he was still alive, barely. Blood trickled from a wound beneath his shoulder, seeping through his shirt and soaking into the dust at his feet. Behind him, the walls of rock rose like jagged sentinels, narrow and steep. The rising sun hadn't reached them yet, and the shadows clung tight, waiting for the day's first scream. Naeli was gone, riding hard for Calico Ridge before the last push. Boone had sworn to hold the canyon until she reached the law, if there was still such a thing in these parts. What she carried in her satchel, papers from Severin's men, maps, names, ledgers, was enough to bury the gang in more than just earth. Now came the burial. The thunder of hooves pounded closer. 10 riders, dust-cloaked and armed to the teeth, poured through the narrows, led by Severin at the front. His eyes blazed, hair wild with sweat, shotgun in one hand, blade at his hip. His voice tore across the stone like a curse. "You run out of hiding spots, Talbot." Boone said nothing. He stepped back into the canyon, leaving behind boot prints soaked with blood. The wind carried dust past his legs. He let it. Severin didn't wait. He waved his men forward, and they surged into the canyon like a hammer strike. Then the canyon answered. The first trap went off with a roar, boulders loosed from above, tumbling like giants' dice, crushing horses and men in a scream of splintered bone and thunder. 3 riders never got up. The others scattered, trying to maneuver in a place that offered no room for panic. Boone moved through them like a ghost. He rose from the shadows behind a broken pillar of stone, rifle in hand, shot 2 in the back before they knew he was there. One turned, rifle swinging wide. Boone ducked, rolled, came up with a pistol, and put a bullet through his throat. Screams echoed, then silence, then another boom. This one fire, oil jars igniting in the pass, flames licking up toward the stone walls, turning the exit into a wall of heat. The last of Severin's men fought like animals. Boone fought like memory. One by one they fell. Then it was just the 2 of them. Clay Severin emerged from the smoke, bloody but unbroken, black duster scorched at the hem, shotgun trembling in his hands. Boone stood opposite, leaning slightly to one side, pain etched into every breath. Clay smiled with too many teeth. "Should have died in the fire, Boone." "I tried once," Boone said, voice dry. "Didn't take." Clay lifted the shotgun and fired. The blast slammed into Boone's side, dropping him to his knees. Blood sprayed the rock behind him. The world tilted and narrowed. Clay stalked forward, laughing now. "You got nothing left. No men. No ranch. No name worth speaking." He raised the shotgun again. Boone looked up, eyes steady. "You forgot one thing." Clay hesitated. Boone's hand moved, not to his holster, but to the inside of his boot, where an old knife waited, blackened and worn. He threw it. The blade spun through the air, flashing silver once before it sank hilt deep into Clay's gut. Severin gasped, staggered. The shotgun slipped from his hands. Boone dragged himself upright, one foot planted in the dust, the other trembling beneath him. He stepped forward, took Clay by the collar, and pulled him close. "Ghosts don't die easy," he whispered. Then he let the man fall. Clay Severin died in the dirt with his mouth open and his eyes full of the sky. Boone collapsed beside him, staring up at the rim of the canyon, where the sunlight finally touched stone. Days passed. A posse rode out from Calico Ridge after Naeli arrived bloodied and breathless, a bundle of documents in her arms and fire in her words. She told them what she'd seen, about the ranch, the fire, the canyon. When they reached the site, the canyon was quiet, silent as a graveyard. Bodies lay scattered across the stone, charred, broken, bled dry. Severin among them, knife still in his belly. But Boone Talbot was gone. His blood painted a trail that led to the canyon wall and vanished beneath the stones. No body, no rifle, no trace. Some say he died and the wind buried him. Others say he walked out through the mountains, half dead, and disappeared into the Badlands like a spirit never meant to rest. And some believe he still rides, watching, waiting, carrying the weight of his past through a world that's always been too unforgiving for men like him. They say justice don't come easy on the frontier, but sometimes it comes with thunder and fire.